What have I done? What have I become? I can't describe this. This is my mid-mic crisis.
Hello and welcome to the Mid-Mic Crisis. I am Bunchu alongside my esteemed colleague and co-host Chamber. Chamber, how you doing, buddy?
Doing pretty good, man. Actually not doing 100%. I got a little tummy issue today. Had a little bit too much celery at lunchtime, and it's just taking a toll on my body. I also told my daughter, yeah, it's real. The struggle is real. I also told my daughter in the other room to keep her goddamn voice down, and I can hear her screaming already. So I have to.
I can't hear her. So
all right, you let me know. I'm gonna drop down and take care of the problem. All right,
you're good. Yeah, man. What's been going on since last week? We had a busy show last week. I think. Last week, gosh, I forgot. I can't believe it's already been a week. We were talking AI agents, and we went so long. You had to leave to go do #horse stuff. So I didn't even get to get your real takeaways on that episode. What did you think before we get into the rest of the show here?
I finished as soon as I got there. I streamed the last 20-30 minutes of the show. And was super, it was a continuation of my awe for Eric. He is a very impressive person. And yeah, I was just blown away. Like I was talking to some normies in my life, and they're like, "Oh no, this is a pretty, they're like, they were wanting to know what show I was doing. I was trying to explain it to them, and they're like, "Oh, like most of your shows, are pretty hard for me to, wrap my head around." And I'm like, do not even
watch this one.
Don't even think about trying this one then, because I was hanging on by a thread.
Does it feel like are we too technical for folks? I feel like we are
these are a bunch of dummies. These are a bunch of dummies I was talking to.
What does it feel like to have two sets of normies in your life? Crypto normies and now AI normies.
I think they see it all as one grouping. And I honestly do too. It's more or less
emerging tech normies. Is that what we're going with?
Yeah, cutting edge. And I'll even kind of get into my wife a little bit, where it's just like she'll say things like, "Oh, this is scary." I'm like, that's something like old people say. Don't say scary. Be excited. Did you hear that scream, by the way?
I did. I heard that one.
Keep it down in there. Wow. We'll see. We'll see if that worked. I used my Payne's gonna be excited because I used my deep voice. Sometimes I gotta put on my man voice.
Yeah, to yell at your children. That's how it is. We'll save the rest of that for dad talk, I guess.
They don't even believe it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we got amazing feedback from that episode. Super. If you haven't seen it yet, I would say go back and watch it, especially if you're curious about the AI stuff. It was on a new agent platform that will be released here in a couple of weeks called AI Mystic. And it was just this fully autonomous, insane demo that we saw last week.
I have been thinking about it all week. And just like in the background, you and I talking about different things. I'm like, why can't we just use this?
For all of our, right now,
all of our problems.
Right now.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like it can do what we want it to do.
You had homework this afternoon. Did you do it yet?
No.
Okay.
I'm barely keeping this whole facade of a life, above ground at this point.
I feel that in every single possible way. So, all right. Today we are not talking AI per se, but it is not our main topic. The main topic for the show today is all the rage, back to our crypto roots, talking about who is Satoshi Nakamoto. So this will be our crypto talk segment. Chamber, hit it.
This is part of the show where we talk about crypto. It's the part of the show where we talk about crypto.
It's like such a Beach Boys bop.
Love it. I
type
love
of
it.
vibe. Like I just want to do the, that's what I feel like doing
I love it.
anytime I hear that song. But all right, so today we're going back to our original roots. For those who may not know, we have had many iterations of this show. It originally started as a crypto specific show called Wrecked Podcast back in 2018. Chamber and I have been courting each other for quite some time, and back then we were all crypto all the time. And just a quick brief backstory of how the show started. Chamber and I did not know each other. We've actually still never met in person.
No.
Chamber has met producer Payne, but not me.
Hell of a guy.
Yeah, it's certainly. And so back then, Chamber, this was what, 2018, you tweeted out that you were sick and tired of seeing all these people around crypto making all of this money and talking about how much money they're making.
Yeah.
You wanted to see a show about people getting wrecked.
Yeah, I
and
did.
I thought that was a heck of a concept. So I just slid in your DMs and I said, this is interesting. Let's go. And that's how the show started way back then. We have since pivoted now twice to the mint condition. And now I think probably what our final form is.
Yeah, it's an all-encompassing show that deals with, cutting edge technology.
Yeah, I will say it is probably not the proper name for the topics that we cover, but that's our problem for SEO, not yours. So so today we are talking about the question as old as time. Who is Satoshi Nakamoto? This is obviously coming on the heels of the HBO documentary that aired last night. If you haven't seen that, it is called Electric Money, and it aired on HBO Max, or I guess I just have to call it Max now.
Do you know, I was watching Saturday Night Live this weekend, and they were talking about like that specific platform. So it was obviously HBO, then it was HBO Go, then HBO like Home, then HBO Max, and now
it's just Max. Yeah,
it's wild. It's wild how many.
Look, I thought
as many as us.
I was just gonna say I thought our rebrands were bad, but if HBO can do it, we can do it.
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
So stay tuned for Mid Mike Max coming to a podcast platform near you.
Just Mike.
Just Mike. Yeah, just Mike. Yeah, I like that. And spelled M-I-K-E though. And then people are just gonna be totally fucking confused. Exactly.
Are both these guys Mike?
Yeah. No, neither are Mike. All right. So, but we're talking about Satoshi today. And I mean, let's just start, I think, where the documentary build itself, right? So leading into this, there were, I think there's so many angles to cover here. So leading into the announcement and the marketing of and the teasing out of this documentary, people were touting it as like, okay, we're going to reveal who Satoshi is 100%. This could have impact on, the world economy and the presidential election, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously I don't think we saw anything like that. I was trying to watch if price was being impacted live at all. And it wasn't when it aired. However, we are down 1.83% today. However, that is not a Bitcoin problem. That is across the board. So we are currently sitting here at 60,982 smackaroos for one Bitcoin. Ethereum at 2415. Also down 1%, and nothing else really matters. But for this conversation, at least, so the idea was, okay, Satoshi's going to be revealed and the whole world is either going to rejoice, collapse, or whatever. We did not see that. There was tons of speculation leading into it, as there always has been, about who the main suspects were going to be. And so much so that there was a poly market. If you're not familiar with poly market, it is a peer-to-peer prediction market that, you can go and essentially put up any sort of, two-sided market and fund it with liquidity, and somebody can come and take those bets on the side or whatever. And so there was quite a big.
They should just rebrand it to Bro Bets. Because that's what it is. Like,
well, I was getting there, right? It's like, not surprisingly, the crypto bros wanted to gamble, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
So we saw quite the hefty prediction market here, futures market, on who Satoshi was going to be. And the main candidates were, the typical crew, right? So your Hal Finneys, your Craig Wrights, your Nick Szabos, your Len Sassaman, who was I feel like favorite.
That's like a newer one. In the years we've been doing this, I don't think that name's come up very often.
Not too much, not as much as any of the others.
Yeah.
Right. So, by the way, I'm watching the chat here, and Shovel says 100% Hal Finney. T Tully, interesting, says one mistake makes sense. Interesting. Followed Bitcoin since Mt. Gox. No way. It's not shocking. Tully, I'm very curious to know if you thought it was the person they said it was in the documentary. ZG says always been Len. Interesting. So we'll get some takes, I'm sure, throughout the show as we talk about this. But those were the main characters going into the betting market. And we saw, like, a couple of days ago, probably I would say over the weekend, Len Sassaman was the odds-on favorite. And then the market took quite the turn the other way. And the field became the popular betting favorite, which obviously to me says that somebody leaked something to somebody, and that started spreading like wildfire. So before we get into the who of it all, let's talk about this idea of there being a prediction market on it. Now, do you have any takes on this either way?
Like on the prediction market itself?
Let's go two-part question.
All right.
What's your thoughts on prediction markets in general, as far as kind of this decentralized peer-to-peer wagering or predictions? So that's the first question. And then specifically this market.
So I would say like the peer-to-peer, say like blockchain, betting markets, I do think are significantly skewed. Like you can see it in some of the data that in the varying bets that are had out there. I'm like, oh, you can tell who's betting on this. And there is some bias in the betting as opposed to treating it like Vegas bets, which I find a bit more clinical or more, I don't know, less heart. I don't know. I think it's just because there's more betting in Vegas. Like if you take the betting volume on Polymarket, we'll say, versus like the Vegas books,
sure. For context, the Polymarket betting pool was around $30 million
which is nothing.
Specific market.
Which is not nothing.
No, not nothing. But to your point, not even close to, what you would see across a NFL Sunday across regulated books.
I think the volume flattens out bias for most Vegas bets. Do you know what I'm saying? You will see some inherent value, and you will obviously have way more insight on this than I do. But I would say, like, besides like big teams like the Cowboys and like the Lakers, there's so much of a fan base. There is maybe some inherent bias in like the spreads and stuff like that. But because this like the poly market volume is, and honestly, the 30 million is probably the highest they've had, right? I don't know if that's true or not.
I would assume the only probably bigger pool would be the presidential election.
Right. So I just don't think there's enough volume to
maybe we could get a producer Payne check in on what the pool is for the US election on Polymarket, like how much is being wagered.
Yeah, but I would imagine it's probably in the same ballpark, like maybe $50 million tops. You know what I'm saying? I'd be shocked.
Okay, so your take is that it's a relatively small market in terms of betting.
Yes. So then when you're looking at the spreads or you're looking at the percentages, unless you have something like what happened with like Len, where it was really favoring him, and then all of a sudden there was some inside info that dropped that, you know, decimated the odds for him. But if you're just looking at it I would say on a regular day, there is bias in the numbers, which makes me question the viability of the spread. You know what I'm saying?
See, I sort of lean the opposite way in terms of, okay, the way a Vegas line on an NFL football game works. For example, you have bookmakers, like true bookmakers, and the way true bookmaking works is that, you know, the Vegas sports book, let's say someone like a Circa Sports out in Las Vegas, will be the first one to hang a line on, let's use college football, because they are always the first to release college football spreads on Sundays after the games, right? So they will release the lines, and they will actually limit them slightly, right? In terms of how much they take on any one side or total, right? And the reason they do that, they don't limit who can bet, they limit how much you can bet. And the reason they do that is they're moving that line on action, right? So if let's say it's a touchdown favorite, and, you know, someone who's kind of profiled as a sharp bettor comes in and lays the limit on -7, well, they're going to respect that bettor's action, and maybe they're going to move that now out to -7.5, right? And then they'll keep doing that over the course of the week until you somewhat land on a consensus number, right? So maybe it finally closes at a 7 or 7.5, and that's after kind of all of this has been done. And over the course of the week between the two games, you'll get a better picture of where that consensus is, because they move it. They'll take bets on the other side. They'll move it back a little, whatever, and then they start opening up the betting limits on how much you can bet. And by the time it gets to an NFL Sunday, you can put hundreds of thousands of dollars on a lot of these because they've been kind of bet into shape, right? So, yeah. And there's only like really a couple true bookmaking sports books out there in the country, like your DraftKings and your other books like that. Most of them do not make their own numbers. Most of them do not move on action like that. And they're actually just copying the real bookmaker numbers. And they are actually in the business of like limiting who can bet, right? So me, for example, I cannot bet a college football opener for more than like $60 because I am a winner at DraftKings and they don't want me there, right? So enter exchange betting and these peer-to-peer types of markets and a poly market, right? Where now you have no risk of getting limited. However, the liquidity becomes the issue, right? So on a lot, like you can only bet how much liquidity there is, and somebody's got to put that up to be, you know, so somebody's putting up that liquidity or market making that. So, you know, that's how it works in the sports exchange. So enter something like a poly market, really interesting in the sense that like anybody can bet whatever they want as long as there's liquidity. And so to your point of like, what's the actual bias? Well, the Vegas lines that you end up seeing on a football game are the result of this consensus, right? Of bookmaker puts up a line, take bet, move, take bet, move back, take bet, move back until there's a hammered in consensus. So to your point is like, nobody's in the poly market streets. I think you're actually getting a closer look at what the true wisdom of the general crowd is, which I think is interesting, right? Because there's no one to take really no one to take a vig or a spread. Like the books take, 4.5% on each wager, right? Like that's how they make their money. So I think for something like the US election, I think you're probably seeing a really true opinion of where people think the pool of bettors thinks the election is going.
But that pool of better, like speaking specifically on the presidential election, that pool of bettors is inherently, like, I'm going to say male, is inherently
totally, and they're also probably European because it's geogated in the United States, right?
Oh, is it really?
Yes.
Like, I didn't even know that.
I mean, there are very strict regulations on where you can bet legally in the United States.
Interesting.
Right? So,
and I would imagine like these are obviously going to be crypto people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just think there's a leaning for those. If you take male crypto guys,
no, I agree that there's bias in the line. Yeah. I agree that there's bias in it. But what I'm saying is that's probably a true reflection of who the betting pool thinks, rather than
that's fair. Yeah.
What the sportsbook opinion of a football game is, right? Like,
because I would be interested to see like, is like Will Hill still like a betting site?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like what's the line on the because they always had like weird like
I could try to look that up. Like I could look up a FanDuel or something.
That's what I'm saying. Like I'm sure I would be interested to see what the line difference there was. You know what I'm saying?
Actually, I don't know if you can bet on the election on.
I remember I thought it was on Will Hill.
I think you have to bet on the election on like offshore books now.
Oh really? This was years ago. I made a lot of money back in the day for picking the right pope. I had like long odds on like the German one. This was like when the evil Pope. Remember? There was like it was after like PJ or JP2. There was like that like the Star Wars Emperor guy. I bet on him. I made like I think I made like $4,000. It was like all right. I didn't know you could just bet on anything these days. So I really enjoyed that. But getting back to like the Bitcoin, like the Len one. I do feel when you have movement in those because of like the crypto aspect of it and the pool of people that are going to be using it, I feel you're going to get a crypto result where it's like that FOMO into one particular pick. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Where you get like a FOMO swell of volume that can really get out of hand quickly on you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, ZG, the Hitler Youth Pope. That's the one.
So it says a lot. So a lot of these offshore books. So I was right. You can't bet on you have to go offshore to bet on the election.
Okay.
Offshore bettors believe that Harris and Trump have at least an 86% of winning the combined states. Okay. So that's what they're saying. But against each other, it's basically a 50-50 split.
Right. Whereas on Polymarket, I thought it was a bigger spread.
It might be, but that could be because there's no, bookmaker spread in there. You know what I mean?
Right. It's interesting. It's very interesting. I like the idea of it.
But on this specific market, and the reason I asked this to begin with was, this is a outcome that was known to people. This isn't the presidential election, right? Like this isn't a NBA basketball game that's live happening. This isn't a football game that happens live. This was a pre-recorded documentary in which the outcome was known.
To hundreds of people, you would say?
At least hundreds of people, right? So when you see something like Len Sassaman be the favorite originally, and then it tanks to the other, right?
Right.
The field.
You
Well,
definitely know it's not.
I mean, that means you definitely know something was up because it's rigged. It's a rigged game, right? So like, so Phonics here, if you bet on who Satoshi was and didn't have inside info, you're just lighting money on fire. It's like playing roulette, right? You're just playing roulette at that point. And so that's why I was asking what you thought of this particular market, because I couldn't bet into that in a million years.
Like I'm not a betting guy, but the poly market bets are even more of an area where I wouldn't want to make those types of bets.
I have no problem betting poly market if it's not a rigged game, meaning
right? Like if it was like the outcome
was known, right? And
right.
I don't know it. It's basically the same thing as, chasing cabal insider sniped shitcoins, right?
Yeah, you're getting dumped on.
Yes, somebody knows more than you, and
right.
you are at a disadvantage, right? Somebody knows the outcome better than you. Anyway, so that's what happened in the poly market streets. So if you bet one of the kind of usual suspects, you got crushed, and the other side won, and that is because the final outcome. So this is do we have a spoiler alert drop? Because
we do not. Yeah, we do not. Spoiler.
Okay, here's a spoiler alert.
If you're on Twitter, alert. You know what happened. Like,
but maybe you never know. Some people just like look.
We're going to be talking about who HBO says.
Yeah, the show is titled "Who is Satoshi?"
Yeah. Just FYI.
So maybe that's a good way. However, spoiler alert. If you do not want to know who HBO said that Satoshi was, you should probably stop right now, because I'm going to say it now. Okay, that's your fair warning. So this documentary ended up pointing the finger at a gentleman named Peter Todd. Now, were you familiar with Peter Todd prior to this?
Gun to my head, I may have heard the name, but not very familiar.
I agree. I knew a lot of the story, but there were certainly things that like I knew loosely or some details of, right? Like, if you've been in this space for a long time, you obviously know the stories of the Bitcoin talk forums and all of that, and the Satoshi, Hal Finney, all of that kind of backstory. I didn't know of Peter Todd in that way, right?
Not in that way. I agree. Not in that way.
So that was really interesting. And then to kind of follow along this whole path, and it turns out that they're, at the end, they accuse him directly of being Satoshi, is very interesting. So I don't know, where do you want to start here?
Let's, I think that's the bulk of the document. Like, you know what I mean? Like the end result was what everybody was looking for. There were a few takeaways. Maybe we can just touch on a few takeaways of the documentary. One for me was how the mainstream media felt it perfectly fine to throw on a Japanese accent every time they said Satoshi Nakamoto. I was dying. It was like Satoshi Nakamoto. Like every time.
Easy Jim Cramer.
Yeah, every single one. And I was just like, that's insane. Like every single person was doing a Japanese accent when they said Satoshi Nakamoto, which I thought was very funny. I just thought that was an interesting, like when you slam them all together like that, it really opens up your eyes. And then the other takeaway for me, Samson Mao, his connection to what was happening in South America, in
El Salvador.
Thank you. I didn't realize he was that plugged in with the president and all that stuff. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Samson Mao is a Bitcoin evangelist.
Which I've never been a big fan of Bitcoin evangelists in general. Going back to, Bitcoin Jesus. What was his name again? I always forget.
Oh, Roger Ver. He had a big part in the documentary last night. There was a lot on kind of the block size wars, and what I thought was interesting, I mean, there were some really interesting things in the Peter Todd story of it all, right? There's these kind of leaked messages between him and a guy named John Dillon, who openly admits that he's like part of a government agency. And so then, you see Roger Ver at some point in there basically saying that that Peter Todd was working for a government agency, and then he kind of sarcastically says it in the doc a couple times.
Right.
He also sarcastically says or directly says that he is Satoshi Nakamoto a couple times in the documentary. So that was interesting there. But then it turned out, so then they accuse him at the end of basically making up this John Dillon character to kind of cover his tracks, if you will.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is presented as this psychological game that Peter Todd is playing to basically throw you off the scent that he's Satoshi. He kind of makes these comments of like, well, if I were Satoshi, having all of that Bitcoin would be really tempting. And so the only way you would probably not be tempted is to destroy the method in which you could access it, where he kind of suggests that he would, destroy a private key, etc.
Right.
And then there was even some clip, some leaked document where he was talking about being the foremost expert in how to destroy access to Bitcoin. And I thought that was interesting. He basically says, I'm the foremost expert in this. I've done it. I've done such a thing at least once, and I did it by hand, which suggests he, destroyed a seed phrase or whatever.
Right.
But so there's a lot there. And then they try to wrap it all up with this, what feels loose to me, connection between a Satoshi post, the like one of the last Satoshi posts on Bitcoin Talk Forum, and a response that Peter Todd had to that post. They try to make it look like it's essentially finishing Satoshi's thought on this very novel concept that there's no way he would have known kind of what Satoshi was talking about potentially. They present it that way. Now, since then, I've actually seen that like isn't where Satoshi's message ends. There's more to it. And then Peter Todd responds. So it's not directly like, okay, the thought ends and the response happens, right? So it's actually the thought, finish paragraph, Peter Todd coming in an hour and a half later and responding, right? So I don't know, just the fact that they presented it that way and that's not exactly how it was makes me a little suspicious. And then there's, the whole Adam Back thing of it all, which was very interesting. I kind of feel bad for him because I believe he's not Satoshi, but the dude comes off like he's
right, 100%.
Like, yeah, and he almost like certainly knows who it is. Like
I would agree with that.
He was the shiftiest eyed guy the whole time in the documentary, and they just like left those cuts in where he's just kind of sitting there like.
It reminded me of you ever see the documentary The Jinx?
No.
With oh my god, it's if you love documentaries, this is the Breaking Bad of documentaries. It's the best.
Maybe I have seen it. What's it about?
It's about the New York. He's this like New York real estate guy who murders his wife. And then at the end, like they have him mic'd up and he goes to the bathroom and he's burping the whole time. They did a spoof of it on Sunny. Where Frank is
making a murderer one.
Exactly. So but that's what it kind of reminded me of. It's just like I'm like, let's just keep this guy mic'd up. and see what happens. You know what I mean? We might get a
Well,
slip.
they did at one point. They show, I forget who he was referring to. I think he was talking about Samson Mao, and he doesn't like him much either. In terms,
No, but Samson loves Adam.
no, wait, sorry, maybe that wasn't the person who made that comment. It was someone else that made that comment. But anyway, so I don't know. I thought the documentary was interesting because there were things that I certainly learned in terms of details that I did not know.
There was
right?
definitely some new details because, being in the world we've been in for the past, 6-7 years, there's kind of like a baseline of like the story of Satoshi and Bitcoin.
Right.
And this definitely added more to that. But I do feel a part of me is like, oh, this is just, there's also to me, whether it's HBO, whether it's the people making the documentary, we're lining this documentary up with the next Bitcoin bull run very well. So
awareness factor way high, right?
Right. And in the next 4 to 6 months could be even more so. You know what I mean? Like if we do see the anticipated bull run that a lot of people are expecting into the 100K, 200K, even in this possible bull run, and you have a bunch of new people entering the space, this is going to be a very popular documentary for them to watch. This is going to be the newest documentary. This is going to be the freshest information, and all the players are in it. And I just think there's a part of me that's just like, oh yeah, like this makes sense to drop this now. Do you know what I'm saying?
Totally. Tully says, I do believe it's Todd. Not going to lie, I've watched the documentary 3 times, done quite a bit of research over the years.
9 times more than me, by the way.
So Todd did the white paper, but community shaped Bitcoin in his opinion. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, Tully's done more research than both of us combined. Yeah. So if he's watched the documentary 3 times and done all this research and he thinks it is, then maybe
Tully knows what's up. So I mean, we should
hold on. Wait. Before we get there, let's finish off the Todd of it all, the Peter Todd of it all. So
obviously I don't trust anybody that has 2 first names.
Maybe it's not even a real name. Who knows?
All right. Okay.
I mean, now I'm just speculating, but we're gonna go to Peter Todd's page here and just see kind of what he's been saying. Full Satoshi Nakamoto podcast drop. We sat down with Peter Todd, an extensive work, and talked about this. Really interesting. Okay, but he kind of like refutes it pretty heavily here, right? So this guy here, Joe Nakamoto, maybe it's this guy. Maybe it's he's basically saying that the reaction from Peter Todd is missing the point. He's enjoying the speculation because it's funny. He tricked the documentary maker into thinking he's Satoshi, et cetera, et cetera. He said, I probably shouldn't admit it, but he's mostly right. This nonsense is a genuine danger, as crazy people might try to get my non-existent fortune, but it's also hilarious. Thing is, I didn't trick Cullen Hoback. I think he just needed a stunt to hype up his film.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's also this comment I thought was crazy about the IRS coming and taxing his unrealized gains, right? Potentially, right? Because if you're Satoshi,
well, I mean, if he burnt his wallet, then it's unrealized losses, and then you never have to pay taxes literally for the rest of your life. I feel.
Is that how it works?
I'm pretty sure. I'm I'm an accountant.
And my ledger fell off a boat, right? And he talks about Craig Wright. He basically goes on and refutes this whole thing. Oh, this is what I was talking about. So it definitely wasn't portrayed like it was. Like this part wasn't portrayed like this in the movie or on the actual forum, right? Which is interesting. So anyway, so Peter Todd, kind of comes out and says it's definitely not him, Right. There was a shitcoin that popped up. And it was called Your Mom,
Taylor's all this time.
because everybody was in his mentions asking him if he had a pet, and he said that the only pet he has is named Your Mom. To all the Solana meme coin degens spamming my mention, I have one pet and its name is Your Mom. So they spun up a shitcoin and did a little gambling. But Rylan says Adam Back knows the truth. Totally. Doc pretty much convinced him. Seems like Todd likely started it, but I think 3 or 4 of them could have been working together, etc. The crazy thing is, like, if it is Peter Todd, he was like 16, 17 years old.
Well, I think they allude to that too, right? Obviously, being somebody that's younger, which is
right. Even Adam Back says that
Yes.
in the documentary.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I don't know. So what is your confidence level here? Are you just totally out on it? Are you entertaining this? Are you?
I mean, I think some of the comments are kind of piecing together the truth. I do think it's probably a few of these people. The problem is like 2 of the people that we're talking about have passed away. So it makes it much more difficult. And it makes it much more, because to me, at the end of the day, it's the money aspect. It's unless you said, unless they burnt a wallet,
well, the entire infrastructure of Bitcoin could collapse if somebody was found to be Satoshi and decided to move or sell those tokens, right? Like,
right.
The whole thing only works because people accept the fact that those tokens are not in circulation.
That's why I think it's somebody that's passed away, because if it's somebody that was alive, they would either have access to it, right? Or
you burned this, or you
burn it, but you would also let people know that it's burnt to kind of stabilize it, right? If there's
no, you can't, because you the second you let people know that, then they know you're Satoshi, and that's, maybe it's that, or maybe it's not. They're not burnt. They're sitting in a wallet.
But if the wallet if the keys are burnt,
right,
then it becomes burnt money.
Sure they are, right? Is the response to that,
yeah,
right? Like, if you come out and say you're Satoshi and I burned or I destroyed my seed phrase, sure you did, right? Like, okay.
But I can't imagine anybody that would still be holding on to it. Like, if you didn't, so much time has gone by. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, what are we talking about? 2010 was that 14 years?
2009, yeah.
15 years. We are talking about 15 years, and of those 15 years, 10 of them, or maybe not 10. Yeah, maybe 10 of them, you're a millionaire. You know what I mean? 5 of them, you're a billionaire.
Yeah. But if you believe the Satoshi vision, that wasn't.
I don't believe anybody. I don't believe anybody is that forthright.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if you're the inventor of something like this, the creator of something like this, you have a different view than if you are a buyer of something like this.
At one point, they said whoever holds that wallet would have been a trillionaire at one point.
Well, no, they will if it hits. They will if it hits $1 million or something.
Is that what it was? Okay.
Yeah, because if you do the math right now, if it's 1 million tokens he has.
What's in the wallet again? Sorry, how much?
I think it's 1 million tokens, right?
1 million tokens?
It's like $60 billion. Yeah.
It's not nothing.
Right, no. It's like,
but I also think there's
$60 billion. If you had, it's $60 billion.
I find it difficult to believe that somebody has the ability to not touch it. You know what I mean? To not take advantage of it.
But that's the point. That's what Peter Todd says. He says you wouldn't be able to not touch it. So the only way to live with it is that you would have destroyed it. And if you destroyed it, but if you destroyed it in 2010, when it was nothing, then it doesn't matter. Like
it doesn't matter, but wouldn't it be better if I am Satoshi, we'll say, wouldn't it be better for me to try to convince people that those million Bitcoins are gone, to stabilize, you know what I mean? To add stability to the storyline, I guess. Do you know what I'm saying? Isn't it more beneficial?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess, but at some point it goes too far and you can't come back from the fact that like Satoshi disappeared. You know what I mean? Rylan says what you're also missing is that just because that one wallet is sitting there, surely the inventor, if still alive, also might have another shit ton of Bitcoin in other wallets. That's very true.
100% true. Yeah. And more than likely true.
Of course.
I'd be interested to see, like, do we have net worths on all of these people? Because that's an interesting.
Dude, it doesn't matter. They're mega billionaires. Like they're
all billionaires? Are they all billionaires?
Probably not billionaires.
Right? Yeah.
Like in order to be a billionaire, maybe. I mean, maybe. In order to be a billionaire, you would need to own like 60,000. Is that? No, wait.
You said 1 million Bitcoin was 60 million or 60 billion. So 1/60th of that. So I don't know. I'm not smart like that, but 1/60th of a million Bitcoin, which seems like not that many Bitcoins. Like maybe
you would need 16,000 Bitcoins. So,
yeah.
So most of these people probably are. You know.
But I don't know. It's interesting to me. I just think there's a part of it that's beneficial to let people know that specific wallet is destroyed. If it is in fact destroyed, that's why I just think it's somebody that's passed away. That's
okay. So let's talk about the other options here before we wrap up. So the usual suspects. So who do you think? Well, first of all, wait. You didn't give the confidence level in Peter Todd.
Out of 10, I'm like at a 6 for Peter Todd.
I was gonna say 6 also.
Yeah, I'm like out of my. He's alive, which docks points in my opinion for me. I just don't trust anybody, and he's obviously denied it, and he seemed a little tongue in cheek, and it does seem like the documentarian was just landed on him. It was a name that nobody really talked about. It was a name you could add to the pool that had some through lines that you could make believable. Do you know what I'm saying? I think
I think it's like his proximity to like Adam Back.
You could make a documentary based on that. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, they did. It was 1 hour and 40 minutes long. Yeah, and which I thought was long, but it was good.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, so you're a 6. I'm like a 6 as well. So okay, let's go through who's your leading candidate.
I think for me, it's Hal Finney. It just makes a lot. Him being passed away makes it a bit more. You know what I mean? Like obviously, if he's no longer with us, there's no access to.
Received the first Bitcoin transaction.
Received the first Bitcoin transaction.
I liked our buddy Steve's rationale for this point the other morning on Coffee with Captain, because it's spot on. He said, it's definitely Hal Finney, because how many times do you go test a transaction by sending something to yourself? He's like, if it's the first transaction, you're gonna send it to yourself.
Wrong. That is like a solid point. And also too, like, I'm pretty sure, I might be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure he was the one that had the proximity to Mr. Nakamoto that lived down the street.
Yeah, there was a Nakamoto that lived down
Dorian
Nakamoto, who, by the way, is the picture. That guy, Dorian Nakamoto, is the like.
I mean, that is Satoshi Nakamoto.
That is Satoshi. Yeah, that's Satoshi. Exactly. Imagine being that guy.
And he's broke. I mean, not in relative terms to the other people we're going to be speaking about today, he is not he's not benefiting from this Bitcoin storyline.
Yeah. So the case for Hal Finney, first recipient of Bitcoin transaction, he helped develop the key cryptographic tools used in Bitcoin. He had a strong relationship with Satoshi on the forums and all of that
Right.
stuff. He obviously denied it.
Yeah, of course. Which is, to
The
me, that's not an against. That is
And then he had
denial
the health
is
issues. But the one thing I thought was very interesting in this documentary, because we're talking about destroying the seed phrase or whatever the key is, they did this very brief mention of Hal Finney passing away from ALS, and almost like tongue in cheek, not like just in passing. And I didn't know. Did you know he froze his brain?
I did know that, yeah.
I didn't know that.
That's where the seed phrase is.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. That's exactly where I was going. I'm like, dude, memorize the damn seed phrase and or the private key, and he's just gonna come back in the future when, you know, maybe he's this insane futurist and he realizes that at some point we're all going to upload our consciousness to the cloud. His brain's going to be unfrozen and he will be sitting on the most wealth in the
he's going to have 5% of the world's wealth.
Mm-hmm. He'll be robot Hal Finney, and he'll have that seed phrase. So I thought that was really interesting. So that's always been my lead candidate. So I was really surprised that they spent almost zero time talking.
Well, that's because, you know why? If you're putting out a documentary and your whole new hook is this Peter Todd fella, which is, again, just a new name to add. And again, what the hell do I know? He very well could be Satoshi Nakamoto. But in my mind, it's like, oh no, he's a fresh name to add to the list. There is a plausible storyline that we can create to put out this documentary prior to the 2024, 2025 Bitcoin bull run. Like there's just a lot of things that make sense financially for somebody to put out a documentary like this. And to not talk about Hal Finney makes a lot of sense too, because if you're trying to push this one storyline, it doesn't make a lot of sense to talk about I would say the storyline that makes more sense.
Yeah, I thought the way they would probably do this, and they didn't, was like, here are the people we've always thought it was, and here's why it's not. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, but they, you know, they kind of sort of disprove most of these people in some way or another, at least, right? Because like one of the reasons was it Hal Finney or something? They were saying like somebody was posting as Satoshi while one of these folks, I forget who it was at this point, was like running a 5K. And so like, okay, couldn't be for the most part this person. Like, and there was a bunch of like, you know, proof like that for a lot of these people, right? So, okay, so Hal Finney was always my leading candidate.
That's like an 8 out of 10 for me.
I was gonna say he's probably 7.5 for me, and that's probably as high as I'll get on any.
I agree.
Right?
I agree.
Like, okay, so Hal Finney for me. Couple minutes left here. Who do you have second?
Like, I don't know. Maybe it's, again, Len Sassaman passed away. RIP. There's less checkpoints there for me, but the fact that he's passed away, you know, he's a cryptographer. The timeline kind of, you know, makes sense. You know, I don't know. There's nothing directly.
Well, the timing of the death, aligns with the disappearance.
Right.
Rather than said it was Hal Finney who was running. So maybe it's not.
I mean, I put out stuff on schedule.
Well, now in these days, we that didn't exist then.
Couldn't he do it through his glasses?
Like I just did. You saw me do that.
I'm watching this. Like he's doing something in there. I don't know what he's doing.
What happened was I went to do something like this and I accidentally hit the side, which is how you turn on. So like I can if I hit this right here, my podcast will start playing. And so I started accidentally playing a podcast in my ear while I was recording. But
Hal Finney would never believe the world we live in today.
No. Chris Underwood with a really good point here. It's definitely Chamber. 2 minutes left here. Who do you have second?
Um,
Like, I don't know. Maybe it's not.
I
We've talked about you being a cult leader just today, so maybe you
That's
are.
the nicest thing. Honestly, my wife has said that about me for a long time, and I showed her that little back and forth this morning, and she's like, "These people understand you."
Isn't Len's image embedded in the nodes? I think it's him. Another one. Interesting point there. The other, Rylan says the other argument against that was his code was beautiful and Satoshi's code was not. Yeah, that was. I thought that was actually a really interesting point. That like people were saying that the original Satoshi code was basically garbage, and so it could have been written by a kid. Who the fuck?
And the Len, they say the Len Sassaman didn't know C++, which I don't know who said. Like, who says that? You know what I mean?
I've always been more of a C- guy myself.
Yeah, I was a C++ student.
Yeah, it was always... okay. So what's your score for Len?
I would say 6, similar to Peter Todd. I would put him and Peter Todd in the same bucket. After that, it's like maybe like Nick Szabo. Maybe.
Yeah, we're into like people I think it's not at this point.
I agree.
Like, right,
people that think know who it is or like have connection, but definitely is not Satoshi Nakamoto. So
the argument for Szabo is, he had BitGold, which was pre-Bitcoin.
Yep.
He also cypherpunk. His writing style matched Satoshi's. So you have a document here that you made. You did not include Adam Back. Did you think there's any chance that he is? Because I think there's a good chance he could be. I think there's a better chance he is than like a Nick Szabo. And I definitely think he knows who the hell it is.
I agree. I don't think it's him, but in the probability scale of who I think knows what's up, Adam Back is number 1.
Yeah, totally.
That's where I land on him.
I mean, he's a 7 with me up there.
Of like it could be him.
No, you're right.
I think it's just he's like a 9 out of 10 that he knows.
Because I actually think he was being very genuine in the documentary, and when like the documentarian basically says like, I think you're Satoshi, or like, I'm starting to think you're Satoshi, and his reaction was like, man, that's really disappointing because I was hoping you'd be the one to understand that I'm not.
Exactly.
Right. Like, I thought you were doing this job to really get it, not just I mean,
it was just to make my takeaway was this was being made to make a Bitcoin show that will become popular in this Bitcoin era. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Which is
okay.
fine.
So other people that we think it's not, that are usual suspects. I mean, the
bottom of the barrel.
Yeah. Craig Wright.
Craig Wright. Yeah.
I have more confidence it is you than it is.
I have more confidence that it's me than it's Craig Wright.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, it's obviously
Craig Wright was in this documentary, and mentioned in the documentary, and like he basically ruined all the chance that the big blockers had, and Roger Ver was definitely salty about Craig Wright.
Definitely.
So, yeah.
All right.
Hold on. Here we go. Ryland. There's a more plausible explanation that Todd started it, maybe even came up with the pseudonym, brought in Chris Back and Hal. So Chris, what was his other name? I forget, or his last name, the other guy from Blockstream, and other Blockstream founder that they don't interview. Yeah. I mean, that's probably true, right? And they all conspired to keep Satoshi a total secret. I'm not sure if it's for character or a secret character for the culture as much as it is like when you hear them explain why they were so pro like small block. One of the fundamental arguments to it was if you can change something so core to the infrastructure,
right,
just because, well, that loses confidence in the whole thing, that it could somehow, some way change in the future. And that line of thinking totally tracks to why keep Satoshi a secret. It also tracks to why never prove you've burned the key, right? Because it's like status quo now is status quo, right? Like don't blow up the apple cart, right? And so I thought that was an interesting point too.
But
okay, so not Craig Wright.
Yeah, not Craig Wright.
Anyone else?
I think that's everybody in the mix. Another one that's passed away, who's our guy that passed away in prison, allegedly passed away in prison.
John McAfee.
John McAfee.
First of all, friend of the show, two-time guest, John McAfee, whom I once asked what drink he would pair with eating his own penis on it.
And he had an answer for it.
He sure did.
Go back into the archives.
Some kind of 12-year-old whiskey. By the way, that was episode 6 of Wrecked Podcast.
We were top heavy. We were a top heavy show.
Yeah, we peaked. we peaked way back then. Yeah, we're on a new kind of come up though. We've got
I agree.
New piece of momentum going. We've got our website is doing well. Maybe someday we'll be able to actually get paid for doing
one day
a show. Maybe someday.
Yeah.
If you know any sponsors, come hit us up. But all right, it's time. You got 2 more minutes, Chamber?
I got 2 more minutes. I got 2 more minutes.
Let's spend one of those minutes talking to producer Payne on 1 minute of pain.
He's not looking for any fame. It's too late to hide time for 1 minute of pain. 1 minute of pain.
All right. This is 1 minute of pain, where we bring producer Payne into the mix to talk about the show and anything we've talked about during the show. So Payne, having heard all this, having watched the documentary, what is your power ratings of Who is Satoshi?
I'm going to be honest. I didn't hear a word you just said because I noticed the hat that was on your head for the first time. You switched it up on us.
This is my dinner hat.
That's right.
This is the fancy hat, the dinner hat. Yes. I can't find my normal black hat, so I've been going through a couple different hats in the past week. So this is I go through phases. This is definitely a wintry fall hat for me, and so you'll be seeing much more of this.
I love it. Well, I do have a few comments. Can you hear me all right, by the way?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Adam Back, he definitely knows who did it. I agree. There's no one who can convince me he doesn't. I don't think we'll ever really know the truth unless the tokens are sold. And even then, maybe not. But I agree with Bunchu's take that the creators of something like that would want to see their creation succeed as a concept more than just like necessarily sell their
$1 trillion.
It doesn't matter.
$1 trillion.
Well, it's not worth $1 trillion right now. Either.
No, but like, it's what do we say? $60 billion right now.
Yeah, but whoever it is, if they're still alive, like
that's like upper middle class. Not even worth it.
But like to Ryland's point earlier, is that person probably would still have quite a bit of Bitcoin. They don't need to be those million tokens. They probably have quite a bit of Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's fair.
For sure. And I'm convinced that it is a group. But I
think it's like what 4 people? Is that like 4,
I think
3, 4 people?
I think so. I'm surprised, Chamber, you knew about the frozen. Actually, I'm not surprised. I didn't know about the frozen head either. So I am convinced too that the key.
I'm very familiar with the frozen head dead people. Walt Disney.
Yeah, that's like
Hal
one
Finney.
of Chamber's kinks.
I love frozen head talk. Big frozen head guy. I'm gonna freeze my brain when I pass away. So that's you guys can look forward to that.
I hope so. There's a wealth of conspiracy knowledge in there that cannot be lost to society.
There's also Einstein's brain too. It's not frozen, but it was segmented and then lost. It was
and then eaten.
And then eaten by me.
Oh, I love it. Those are my thoughts, though. I think to Ryland's point, they needed funding, so Blockstream kind of was a necessary thing, and we are all Satoshi, right?
Yeah,
we sure are.
That's the key takeaway for today's episode. We are all Satoshi.
That's the real answer.
Yeah.
That's the real answer.
Satoshi is the friends we made along the way. By the way, I mean, they did trash
Satoshi.
they trashed NFTs and Bored Apes pretty hard.
I did see that. Yeah,
for about 30 seconds.
As they should.
Anyway. All right, that is going to do it for us today. Chime in on the comments on who you think Satoshi is. Did the documentary sway you? Give us a like, subscribe, comment, all of those wonderful things. And until next time, keep the mic hot.
What have I done? What have I become? I can't describe this.